And we're finally back with more Cody Bonds. This time around, I believe this guy's name is MALUS DARKBLADE. He appeared in the same DLC trailer for Warhammer 2 as Deathmaster Snicketch. And if I remember correctly, his sword thing or whatever, it also has like a demon that's like trying to take over his mind. And I think in his campaign, there's also this mechanic whether you want to like listen to the demon to gain more power, but also you kind of lose yourself more. And also the fact that this guy is apparently like a one-man army. Like, he's just that kind of lord that can solo an entire other army on his own. Depending on how you build him, of course. But yeah, let's see what Cody has to say about him.
Welcome to a noob's guide to MALUS DARKBLADE. This is MALUS DARKBLADE, the tyrant of hag grief. And in Warhammer, the Dark Elves are basically Canadians, which makes him a power-addicted skid from upcountry who tried to take down a big city slam and instead hoovered some demon schneef and wound up an even bigger degen than before. MALUS DARKBLADE is the bad boy Dark Elf, who encouraged a generation of female readers to again fix the bad boy listato. Who am I kidding? No girls read this stuff. These videos have like 98% male viewers.
Dude. Well, I see Cody is suffering from the same issue. I believe the stats last time we checked was that like 99% of our viewers are male, so shout out to the 1% of females watching. I see you. And thank you very much for being here.
MALUS DARKBLADE is the epitome of teenage male edgy power fantasies, where his only goal is for the world to recognize how awesome he is. Complicating this is the fact that he must wrestle with changes in his body that he can't control while struggling to find his place in society. It's a puberty metaphor. MALUS DARKBLADE is basically 13 Reasons Why personified. He refuses to give up even when it's a bad idea and pushes everyone around him to their deaths for his own amusement. And yet despite this, MALUS is a character that is still fun to read, and you root for him even though he's a villain.
Really?
Because somehow he manages to show growth over his book series, even when Games Workshop only publishes stories written by a room full of monkeys with typewriters. So what you're left with is a character who doesn't know the meaning of the word quit, who struggles on in the face of insurmountable odds, sometimes with or without a soul, and little things like the skin that covers his body, all because of a greater desire to prove himself. And if that's not a metaphor for life in the 21st century, then I don't know what is.
Interesting.
MALUS DARKBLADE's backstory starts off as typical Dark Elf drivel, because, as I mentioned before, in the world of Warhammer Fantasy, the Dark Elves are basically Canada, and there's nothing more Canadian than an emo sadomasochist who spends too much time listening to Marilyn Manson in high school and never went outside without his leather duster from The Matrix, so you couldn't tell if he was playing with himself or a Glock under his black jacket. On second thought, the Dark Elves might be American. There's just a confusing lack of guns. The bastard child of the General of Hag Grief, someone at Games Workshop read Game of Thrones and liked the idea that all their northern bastards were called Snow, and thought, what is the most generic evil thing I can co-opt to call my elves? Well, I know, Darkblade, and frankly it's such poor writing I refuse to say it. So MALUS Dimhorn here grew up exemplifying all the virtues expected of a Druchii: unscrupulousness, cruelty, cunning, and ambition, poising him to become a commander of Dark Elven armies or a warehouse manager at Amazon. But MALUS Blacksaber wouldn't become the next ruler of Hag Grief without power, so he set off into the Chaos Waste in search of treasure to buy his way into high society. MALUS Pitch Dagger's Wikipedia page is almost as long as John Holmes Johnson, so I'm not going to cover the whole thing here. Instead, I'm going to assume that despite most of your YouTube comments, you do know how to read and encourage you to check out the books. But
oh my god. Well, I mean, true. I'm gonna assume that this journey that Mr. MALUS DARKBLADE has gone on is where he finds this sword.
The high note of his series is when, in his greed, he accidentally unleashed the demon Zarkan from the realms of chaos, which is sort of like going to Disneyland when your kid has measles. And now, after a series of wacky, odd couple-style murderous hijinks and escapades, the comedic duo of Zarkan and MALUS begin the game with the demon threatening to forever drink MALUS Dim Knife's eternal soul and doom him to perpetual torment. But lucky for you, MALUS Gloomsword has proven to his boss, Malekith the Witch King, that having an interdimensional STD does have its perks. For one, he never feels alone anymore, as the demon's voice is constantly taunting him inside his head. Though this voice that's in-game must be region-specific, because mine sounded a bit like Foghorn Leghorn.
Boy, I said boy, now pay attention to me, boy. I'm not just talking to hear my head, boy.
If you're wondering why my demon...
That would be so funny if you could get a mod specifically for that to change it into whatever you want.
Zarkan sounds like he sits around sipping mint juleps on the front porch of his plantation, it's because you begin the Vortex Immortal Empire campaigns on the far sides of the Warhammer world in the deepest Southlands. Which brings us to the elephant in the room. Malus Duskcleaver here isn't in Not Africa for a safari. One of Games Workshop's parting shots to the colonies was to cast them as marauding slavers who only seek their own pleasure and the destruction of all that is beautiful in the world in the name of capitalism and democracy. I mean, evil. Evil, obviously. So your campaign as Malus Shadowshank, I kid you not, has you collecting slaves to send back to the new world, so they can then be used to mine and craft goods to be sold to the old world to fund the Witch King's wars, and then hire generals to go back to the Southlands to pick up more slaves, which means you're personally helping to perpetuate the triangle trade in this campaign.
Now that is slander against a capitalistic enterprise.
And some
It is definitely not a reference to anything. Oh, no.
Somehow, it actually gets worse, as this DLC also comes with new units to help collect Malus's exportable goods. The first is the new High Beastmaster General, who gives buffs to every kind of monster in the Dark Elf roster so you can field your own crass menagerie, though he loses points in my book for not having 2 ferrets, BDSM gear, and a creepy eyeball ring. Instead, this Beastmaster rides around on a dinosaur-drawn chariot or manticore with a bonus to anti-large in combat, and I'm sure that's what the whip is for, you know, spanking the big guys, and the chariot. Definitely not whipping slaves, even though it's in their original description. And accompanying him is the new Dark Elf hero unit. Oh man, I really don't want to say this.
The Masters. We call them Masters. See, Masters is upstanding boys of unimpeachable character from good families and noble houses, doing the best they can to get ahead and serve their sweet home of Alabama Nagaroth. And of course, parts of that is keeping your slaves in order, but it's a tiny part now. So don't you go denigrating what makes their society beautiful. It is an institution.
It is the Dark Elves.
So don't you be talking bad
what they
about
do.
none of them Nagaroths.
These dreadlords in the making haven't proven themselves in battle yet, so they're eager to show off in hopes of taking future commands. In battle, they're a nice tanky option that helps hold the line, and on the campaign map, they encourage growth wherever they are and help reduce the loss of slaves. So I guess that makes them the good masters? Slaves have always been a part of the Dark Elf economy in Warhammer 2, and they were even part of Difflin's mechanic in Thrones of Britannia, but they've never felt so front and center. I'm making jokes about it here, but really there's no denying you are playing the baddies in this game. You even start with a slaving Black Ark ship right off the coast, ready to whisk people away. So if you play as Malus Foggy Rapier, be prepared to just embrace it all, name your ship the Amistad, and go to work expanding mass bondage across the Dark Continent, and realize that this is probably as close as we'll ever get to a Confederate States Civil War faction in a Total War game. But Malus Dusky Dirk has found other ways to make money in the game. Pulling a De Beers Diamond Company, he's poised to take over the Southlands and exploit it for its natural resources, gaining 30% additional income from mining. And if anyone objects to your diamond monopoly, you can always feed them to your Cold Ones, as Malus's talents reduce recruitment cost and upkeep for any Cold One Knights, Chariots, or Dread Knights in his army, thanks largely to his connection with his unique Cold One mount, Spite. Normally, Dark Elves have...
That was such a funny moment. When I moused over, I think it was Rekhart's army, and I was like, wait, they have Cold Ones? I think they have like some sort of mechanic where they recruit the beast or whatever from their region. But I guess it makes sense. They are the faction that kind of enslaves other people, so yeah, taming monsters is not too far from that. I always thought the Cold Ones were like unique to the Lizardmen, but yeah, the only way we can fix that problem is to dry them out of Lustria.
Have to slather themselves in an awful smelling perfume to make themselves so unappetizing Cold Ones won't eat them. But Smite is such a loving velociraptor that he's the closest thing Malus has to a friend.
Who's a good velociraptor? Who's a good skater, good boy? You best be scratching that good boy's tummy and feed him some slaves you want to keep him happy.
Malus is unique in that he begins his campaign as a military ally of Nagorond and the Witch King Malekith, something Malekith doesn't even offer to his own mother, because even in a world of murder elves, it's still still bros before hoes. And like the best bottom bitch, your objective in the Vortex campaigns is to collect and mail scrolls of Akardi back home to Witch Pimp Daddy Malekith, which is exactly the same as every other Dark Elf campaign, even spawning an army every time you reach one of the nodes. But the difference here is someone else is worrying about minding the Vortex, and you're just concerned with sending 5 shipments of magically enchanted post-it notes to Witch King Metal Pants so he'll finally tell you how to make your own elixirs of control. Just conquer locations with the glowing symbol, build the requisite building, and rinse repeat until you've completed this literary fetch quest, allowing Malus Jetcutter to finally issue an emancipation proclamation to the demon Zarkan. But much like Chumbawamba, he will get back up again, because your possession meter constantly ticks north every single turn, and special missions from Zarkan threaten to move it ever closer to overtaking Malus's soul. And only these handcrafted Jaeger bombs can take the edge off your demon counter, knocking it back down again by half with each new shot. You create them by sending shipments or pressing this little button here. But these elixirs aren't free, and since you need their soul-saving juices to keep you from going full demonic, Malekith makes sure to charge you a bit more every time you ask for them. So yeah, I guess the Dark Elves are definitely American. But the choice...
Well, yeah, there you go. But interesting. He has his own cooldown meter, basically, or, well, not cooldown meter. It's more like a timer on your campaign. I don't think it would be like a game over immediately, right? When that reaches 0 or whatever. But it probably gives you like different bonuses or debuffs or whatever, depending on the level of possession. And I know that Cody just moused over it, and I probably shouldn't even be like, questioning any of this. But even if he did, I'm still very new to the game. I don't really understand exactly what that means.
Choice of whether or not to spend more money on healthcare is made a little easier on turn 2. You start all your campaigns with your army on one side of the world and your capital on the other, basically splitting your forces. So it's a relief when a shadowy Scrooge McDuck offers to buy Hag Grief off of you for a princely sum. You can take it and be swimming in copious coke money in the Southlands, or you can reject it, disband your army, and then rehire them all back in the frozen north to begin a very different campaign, because only Germans are dumb enough to fight a 2-front campaign. Twice. Your second big choice in this campaign is whether to be an arcane.
I feel kind of called out because that's exactly what I did. Oh, I don't know. I was a noob in the campaign map. But yeah, that is a pretty bad idea. And I didn't realize there were split starts like this until I watched a bunch of, I think his name is Zarkovich's, videos about different campaigns and how to manage their starting positions. But I would think that a campaign that gives you 2 starting cities to have to defend is probably just much more difficult than your usual campaign with only 1 city, where you can expand out into your own province and then increase your influence and money and power there.
Crack addict, or an upstanding evil general. If you choose to wean yourself off of your purple meth demon, people will actually start to trust you to manage armies and lead a nation. And when you're in full control and regularly attending AA meetings, you can actually unlock the right of the War Master. It instantly recruits an army of everything that goes bump in the Dark Elf Knight that isn't already being bumped by the Cult of Pleasure. Hydras, Black Dragons, Cardabisses, Medusas, Scourge Runner Chariots, and Cold Ones will all spawn at your faction's capital. And if you have a decently leveled high Beastmaster around, this is your new win button. And this army just so happens to feature the 3 new Dark Elf units that come with this DLC. Scourge Runner Chariots are what happens when someone gets the brilliant idea of sticking crossbows on chariots, so you can both roll and shoot at the same time. It's truly revolutionary. The Bloodrack Medusa is a ranged monstrous artillery piece, and the Bloodrack Shrine, oh no.
Say,
the demon
that scaly girl is hotter than a prostitute in a pew on Sunday. Just looking at her will make your ears sweat. They even put that petunia up on a pedestal. She gonna cause more confusion than a Skaven at a burlesque show. And that's how you banish a demon. But when the feces hits the fan, there's only one person you'll be turning to, and you'll probably want to sell your mom's microwave to ride that pink pony again, to become an unstoppable force of nature that can take down 4 cops at a time and shoot purple.
We pressed 1 button and now we're back at full health. Are we deteriorating over time, or is that just the damage from them?
Lightning from his fingers with unlimited power, instantly restoring your health and letting you spirit bomb your enemies, because when fully hopped up on Grape Drink, Malus Black Edge can go Super Saiyan. Afterwards, you may feel a twinge of remorse and want to switch back to methadone, and Malus's skill tree encourages you to choose between these two lifestyles. But don't worry,
Gotcha.
Zarkan will always be there for you, waiting to welcome you back into his warm, fuzzy folds when you need him. And that's a noob's guide to Malus Darkblade, the tyrant of hag grief. But seriously though, don't do drugs. Meth will mess you up, and I can only imagine what greater demon meth does to your teeth. Probably turns them into fangs or gummy bears that scream all the time when you chew.
That is an interesting image. But yeah, cool. I guess it kind of adds to the replayability as well. Whether you want to like go it clean or whether you want to go full demon form, they both have their own different benefits to them. And I'm glad that it's not like a complete detriment to you. It just depends on how you want to use it. And now for GROM the Paunch. I think this is the first green-skinned lord that we're watching a noob's guide for.
Welcome to a noob's guide to GROM the Paunch. This is GROM, a goblin with a childhood obesity issue that led to chronic bullying and an unfortunate nickname that followed him into adulthood,
I think he ate
which
troll
led
meat
to
and
poor
that's what
dietary
happened.
habits and misplaced anger issues that have perpetuated a cycle of violence. Or he's just Australian. Take your pick. The only greenskin to ever penetrate the elf home of Ulthuan, but after a defeat at the hands of Eltharion, the warden of Tor-Yvresse, GROM is spoiling for a rematch, and this time it's personal. GROM the Paunch is one of two legendary lords in the Warden and the Paunch DLC for Total War Warhammer 2, also called the expansion that everyone saw coming. Originally, this guide was going to be all Mad Max references, but it turns out CA beat me to the punch on this and already spotted his low-hanging fruit, which is funny since this love child of Jabba the Hutt in Jim Broadbent hasn't seen his own twig and berries since Skinamax was still a thing. Instead, GROM keeps underlings around now to look at his low-hanging fruit for him, who ensure us that his is the largest and greatest of all green foreskins. A bloated legend, GROM is the goblin Elvis, and his campaign revolves around the greater good of feeding and buffing his adoring pint-sized legion, because GROM was once a normal goblin just like them, picked, flicked, and kicked by the orcs of his tribe, until one day they got bored, and as everyone who has ever been on a playground will tell you, nothing is more terrifying than a bored, intellectually stunted bully. So these orcs decided to have an eating contest. Not for them, the goblins, who would be forced to eat raw troll meat, which sounds harmless until you realize that troll tissue regenerates, and they can grow back even missing limbs like some sort of super lizard. And when a goblin is forced to eat this meat, it continues to grow inside them. And the results are either Stand By Me's pie eating contest or Monty Python's Mr. Creosote. The orcs have a good laugh either way, but GROM was blessed with a cast iron stomach by the green-skinned god Mork, because instead of an agonizing death, it sparked what would become known in goblin legend as the Battle of the Belly. After swelling up like a bag of popcorn, GROM's digestive tract went on the offensive, absorbing the troll meat so that he grew to tremendous size, the largest of any goblin in history, and now he even possesses some of the same regenerative abilities as a troll, making him an absurdly spherical Wolverine with awkwardly placed nipple piercings. Waddling his way to the top of the Broken Axe tribe, GROM spent years puttering around the Badlands and World's Edge Mountains, where goblins would travel from far and wide to marvel at his prodigious nature. But it wasn't until he single-handedly defeated an orc war boss that his wah truly began. But there was no one to sing his praises. Knackered from the fight, as it required him to walk more than 5 steps, GROM flopped down to the ground to rest and accidentally sat directly on a night goblin. But miraculously, instead of another green stain on his backside, GROM found the goblin was still alive and only partially pancake-shaped, taking it as another sign from Mork. The night goblin Niblet was promoted to carry GROM's lucky banner, which even appears in-game as a quest item that gives increased odds of finding magic items as well as defensive buffs, since what could be more lucky than not dying. But realizing that cardio would not be in his future, GROM resorted to the last bastion of Walmart shoppers, the motorized scooter, drawn here by 3 wolves who could set endurance records on the Iditarod, who pull a chariot held together by iron rebar and flex tape. With his gravity now...
Cody has such a way with words. It always amazes me. Like, I could never, like, come up with all of this. I guess you just get better with it, but, like, man, Cody's sense of humor is just immaculate.
Now measured in solars, other tribes flocked to his banner, and those who flocked too slowly found themselves crushed beneath GROM's widening girth, which ties into the game rather well, as greenskin tribes can confederate into GROM's broken axes after you defeat their leaders in combat, since there's nothing they love more than a good crumpin. But for the goblins and orcs under him, GROM could do no wrong. Raiding, looting, raising, and punting stunties only bloated his reputation, and it's this sort of behavior that leads to a proper WA, and GROM's DLC also introduced new WA mechanics, which besides giving you powerful buffs and reputation growth, you can call a proper WA and set out to conquer a marked settlement with a double-sized army, which naturally recruits to you as GROM rolls his way across the world. GROM's original WA made a grand tour of the old world, but after countless victories, he began to worry that there weren't any proper good fights left in it, and it was from atop a pile of looted gold that GROM first got word of the greater plans Mork had in store for him, as his shaman, Old Blacktooth, delivered the prophecy.
Take to the sea. Gork and Mork need new lands to crush.
So GROM rounded up some village people for a late-night snack and set out to join the Navy, leaving behind unpillaged cities, a confused but grateful empire, and a lingering smell of underboob sweat. On scavenged boats, they set out to Ulthuan, half drowned on arrival from incompetent shipbuilding and OSHA violations. Yet somehow this rolling shambles still made landfall in Yvresse, whose mist-crowded shores look remarkably like Washington State, except with less werewolves and sparkle vampires. Now on the elfin homeland, GROM's shaman, Old Blacktooth, began to go off the rails, instructing the WA to topple ancient waystones so that the elves wouldn't just be beaten, but buried under the ocean, which is probably why GROM also starts the campaign with a huge penalty to high elf relations, because some people just can't take a joke. Cue the arrival of Eltharion the Grim on the back of a winged griffin, who swooped in and cut off Old Blacktooth's head. But GROM didn't die with him. His army broken, he retreated in disgust, but to where no one knew. Until now. It turns out GROM feels revenge is a dish best served warm, gooey, and with suspicious ingredients, because he spent the last 100 years cooking up a Paula Deen-sized portion of payback. GROM's unique mechanic for this DLC is GROM's Cauldron, a giant cooking pot where you combine various bits and bobs into a culinary abomination.
Well, I think there's another lore that also kind of has this mechanic. Was it Grease Goldtooth or whatever? Or maybe I'm mixing these two up. But yeah, you gotta go out and find the ingredients and cook out the best dish that gives you different buffs and stuff for your armies. Which I commented on, I think it was, I forget whose video it was, but I'm pretty sure I watched a campaign of somebody playing as a GROM the Paunch. Actually, no. I think it was Mandalore's review of Warhammer 2 DLC, this particular DLC. That I commented on the fact that it was like so unique, and each playthrough would be kind of different depending on what buffs that you wanted to give your people, and it would encourage different play styles too. This is a cool mechanic. I like it a lot.
And since GROM is apparently a green Guy Fieri, he knows that any good meal is based on the 5 basic food groups: red meat, poultry, fish, mushrooms, and a sauce to drown it all in. You'll need to bash and loot your way around the world to collect ingredients to toss into your pot. Phoenix Claws require you to have beaten a High Elf Phoenix in battle. Stunty Ale is acquired after raiding a dwarf stronghold. And Centigore Milk is...
Oh, what?
Mercifully,
let's not think about it. I can't believe he used the Breath of the Wild cooking sound effects too. I can just imagine GROM doing it, like Lingo, in his little animation.
once you find an ingredient, it's permanently unlocked, and the buffs from any cooked dishes last for 15 turns, and change based on the ingredients used. Some are unit specific and allow things like explosive arrows, and some only affect GROM, though all of them are as awesome as a backflip at a monster truck rally. Assisting in your quest for more Michelin stars is the Troll Hag Food Merchant, who spawns on the map every few turns. This fishy-smelling Honey Boo Boo reject may look harsh, but clicking gently on her blue spot opens her up for business. There you'll get 4 options. Buy whatever random ingredient she found in her underboob, rob her blind by stealing her scrap and gold, let her buff you with a random recipe, which is especially useful early game when you haven't unlocked much yet, and the Iron Chef Throwdown, where you'll take a bite out of a giant pepper and challenge the hag to a cook-off, which is actually a vague word puzzle where you need to cook a certain dish to complete the mission. But with 11 possible recipes as answers, most of which you won't actually have unlocked yet, you'll likely fare as well in this cooking challenge as Disney's Black Cauldron. But if you do manage to divine the dish the hag wants to eat, you'll be rewarded by unlocking a new ingredient slot for your cauldron, so you can toss in an extra ingredient and add even more bonuses to your recipes. Beat her cooking challenge again to unlock a 4th slot and turn GROM into an all-you-can-eat buffet of unstoppability. These culinary concoctions are the driving force of GROM's campaign, and when you've found 12 of the 15 possible recipes, the disembodied head of your old advisor Blacktooth will tell you that it's finally time to go show High Elf Batman who's the real boss. And
The disembodied head? What is going on there? Is it actually, or is it just like a game thing? Because, like, this is Warhammer Fantasy. I wouldn't be surprised if you just carry around his head and he occasionally speaks and gives you advice despite being dead.
you'll unlock a final scripted quest battle against Eltharion, where you siege Tor Yvresse once again. At least that's how it works in GROM's Vortex campaign.
Oh, actually, this siege battle was, I guess, kind of the beginning of, like, siege battles changing from Warhammer 2 to Warhammer 3. Since this was kind of the only one where you could, you know, set up towers or have defenses and lay traps. It was cool. It was fun to see, like, the progression of Warhammer.
Where GROM starts in the Southlands and fights his way north through no less than Imric, Cetra, and Reponse before taking to the waves and invading Ulthuan. A Mortal Empire campaign begins GROM in a new province smack in the center of Paravon, the aptly named Massive Orcal, and has him play more like his historic invasion route. But regardless, GROM's ultimate objective is still to wipe Eltharion and Tor Yvresse from the map. Helping you at the start of each new campaign will be one of every
starting
new
position
unit in this
Immortal
DLC,
Empires.
because you didn't pay $9 to not play with them. First up is the giant river troll hag, a hero unit with access to death magic. Yours is named Da Fishy Tiddlemuncha, which is right up there with Bodie McBoatface for originality. Though really there's only so many names that fit large women who smell of fish and have breasts that could double as door knockers. But you have to love that someone at CA took the time to model her butt crack. I mean, there's no way your average person even looks at this, and you just know that those skull pasties stuck on the front of her boobs were added at the last second after complaints of spontaneous nosebleeds around the office. Because whoever made this model wanted you to know that sometimes the thicker the cushion, the better the pushing. River trolls are the unfortunate less
Who says that? How did you come up with that? Oh my god, Cody.
exciting male version, who reek like a porta potty in the summer heat and give off a constant debuff to melee attack because nobody wants to get close enough to stab one,
they just
and they're
smell so
inspired
bad.
by sea urchins. I bet you couldn't tell. Really, they're a tiered upgrade from regular trolls who upgrade into something even more useful. Stone trolls, who get armor piercing and come with solid defensive stats, but are unfortunately also low effort reskins on CA's part. Others
Oh, there it is. I was about to mention that Mandalore also talked about this, that it was just literally a recoloring. Literal MMO reused assets right here.
have pointed out that Games Workshop did once release a more visually distinct version, but if you bring that model into the game, the nose has to come with 3 black lines just to pass Japanese censorship laws. So I suppose CA worked it as best they could, and then it blew up in their faces anyway. Snotlink pump wagons benefit from all GROM's chariot buffs, and offer a cheap and expendable early game unit with armor piercing and anti-infantry traits, so you can roll them into a blob of high elves and forget they exist. They also come in regular, Da Vinci, and Steamroller flavors, each of which is moderately better than the one before it. But since each is driven by a 13-year-old who hasn't discovered face washing yet, you won't ever be looking at them close enough to actually tell them apart.
Oh my god. This brings back bad memories, man. Man, puberty hit hard. But I'm assuming those are like your light cavalry units. You get super early, they're pretty bad at their job, but they get it done until you upgrade to your much better cav units, or chariot units, or whatever GROM uses.
Rogue idols are literal living piles of shit and shale, hugely expensive, lumbering monstrosities dedicated to the gods Mork and Gork, who somehow become even more deadly as they get injured. If you see one in battle, pray it's on your side. And
These guys are really cool. I think their animations were just really well made. And it's fun to see them go around and like reassemble their body or like disassemble it in order to attack people with it. It's kind of like the Nurglings, but probably not as like sophisticated, or is sophisticated the right word? As complex as the Nurgling animations are.
if not, well, I hope you brought an 80s action movie level of ammunition with you to the fight. All of these units bring some obvious cool factor, but Grom's skills focus on buffing goblins and chariots, so the trolls in particular feel a bit wasted on him, though they're always welcome additions to other Greenskin campaigns. And Grom's unique skill line has lackluster buffs to his own fighting abilities, because Grom's campaign is really about force-feeding a tide of angry green imps enough V8 go juice that they'll roll over the elves in an angry green tide, making engine noises with their mouths the whole time. Really, if you wanted to see an overweight working-class Londoner and his midget friend traverse around the world in search of culinary delights, watch An Idiot Abroad, because GROM the Paunch is his immensity, his enormity, his gargantuity, and he's ready to roll his girth across the world. Thanks for watching this Noob's Guide to GROM the Paunch, and if you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more, or join the channel to support it.
Head over to his channel.
3/4 of you
Linked
are
at the
under
top of the
35 and
description.
98% are male, so you'd honestly be better off by following a cooking channel.
Oh my god, Cody.